A highly anticipated summit between United States President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin took place at a U.S. airbase in Anchorage, Alaska. The meeting, aimed at finding a path to end Russia's ongoing war in Ukraine, concluded without a concrete agreement. However, both leaders described the talks as productive, with Trump emphasizing great progress on several fronts. The summit, which marked Putin's first visit to Western soil since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, has sparked widespread discussion about its implications for global diplomacy, the war in Ukraine, and the geopolitical landscape. The summit began with a striking visual. Putin was greeted with a red carpet and a warm handshake from Trump upon his arrival at the Anchorage airbase. This warm reception stood in sharp contrast to the frosty meeting between Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at the White House in February 2025. The optics of the event were significant, as they suggested a shift in tone from the US administration toward Russia, which has faced severe isolation from the West since its invasion of Ukraine over 3 years ago. The choice of Alaska as the meeting's venue was symbolic. Alaska and Russia share a geographic proximity separated only by the Bering Strait, a point Putin highlighted during his remarks. "Good afternoon, dear neighbor," he reportedly said to Trump upon arrival, emphasizing the close physical distance between the two nations. "We are close neighbors, and it's a fact," Putin later reiterated to the press, framing the meeting as a natural dialogue between two powers with shared regional interests. The leaders met behind closed doors for less than 3 hours, a relatively short duration for a summit addressing such a complex issue. Afterward, they appeared together on a stage to deliver brief remarks to a large group of international journalists and television crews. Notably, neither leader took questions, leaving many details of their discussions unclear. Putin, who appeared upbeat and confident, spoke first. He described the meeting as long overdue and expressed optimism about its potential to pave the way for peace in Ukraine. "I hope the agreement that we've reached together will help us bring close that goal and will pave the path towards peace in Ukraine," he said. However, he offered no specifics about what agreements, if any, were reached. Putin also issued a warning to Kyiv and European capitals, urging them not to undermine the nascent progress through backroom dealings or provocations. Trump echoed Putin's positive tone, calling the meeting very productive and claiming that the two leaders had agreed on many points. He acknowledged, however, that a few critical issues remained unresolved. "There were a couple of big ones that we haven't quite got there, but we've made some headway," Trump said. He emphasized that there is no deal until there is a deal, suggesting that while progress was made, no final agreement was reached. Trump also noted that he would soon brief NATO leaders and Zelensky on the outcomes of the talks, underscoring that the next steps would depend on their responses. Analysts and observers have described the summit as a diplomatic victory for Putin, who has been largely shunned by Western leaders since the Ukraine invasion. Al Jazeera's Osama bin Javaid, reporting from Moscow, noted that Russians viewed the meeting as a win even before it began. Getting the US administration to hold this meeting away from Ukrainians and Europeans was already being seen as something of a win for Putin, he said. The exclusion of Ukraine and European allies from the talks allowed Russia to project an image of renewed global relevance, countering its isolation on the world stage. Javaid further suggested that Putin skillfully tailored his approach to appeal to Trump's preferences without making significant concessions. Putin has understood the pulse of Trump, giving him what exactly he wanted to hear and not giving anything in return, he observed. This perception was reinforced by the lack of concrete outcomes from the summit, which left many questions about what, if anything, was achieved. While Trump and Putin discussed peace, the war in Ukraine showed no signs of abating. Most eastern Ukrainian regions were under air raid alerts during the summit, and Russian authorities reported Ukrainian drone attacks in the Rostov and Bryansk regions. The ongoing violence underscored the urgency of finding a resolution, but it also highlighted the challenges of negotiating peace while the conflict remains active. In an interview with Fox News later that day, Trump elaborated on his perspective, urging Zelensky to pursue a deal to end the war. "Gotta make a deal. Yeah. Look, Russia is a very big power, and they're not. They're great soldiers," Trump told host Sean Hannity. He suggested that Zelensky and Putin were planning a meeting to discuss a possible ceasefire, with the US potentially playing a mediating role. Now, it's really up to President Zelensky to get it done. And I would also say the European nations, they have to get involved a little bit. But it's up to President Zelensky. And if they'd like, I'll be at that next meeting, Trump added. Trump's comments reflected his broader approach to the conflict. which emphasizes deal-making and direct negotiations over prolonged military engagement. However, his praise for Russia's military strength and his call for Ukraine to negotiate raised concerns among some observers about the potential terms of any future agreement. In his first public statement after the summit, Zelensky expressed support for Trump's proposal for a trilateral meeting involving Ukraine, the US, and Russia. Posting on X, he wrote, "Ukraine reaffirms its readiness to work with maximum effort to achieve peace." Zelensky confirmed that he had a long and substantive phone call with Trump, followed by discussions with European leaders. He emphasized the importance of including Europe in any peace process to ensure reliable security guarantees for Ukraine. Zelensky also announced plans to meet Trump in Washington the following week to continue discussions. It is important that Europeans are involved at every stage to ensure reliable security guarantees together with America, he said, highlighting Ukraine's reliance on both US and European support to counter Russian aggression. European leaders, including the French president and German chancellor, issued a joint statement praising Trump's efforts to end the war. However, they stressed that any resolution must respect Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Ukraine must have ironclad security guarantees to effectively defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity, the statement read. They also made clear that Russia should not have a veto over Ukraine's aspirations to join the EU or NATO, and that international borders must not be altered by force. The White House confirmed that Trump spoke with Zelensky and several European and NATO leaders after the summit, indicating an effort to keep allies informed. However, the lack of concrete outcomes left some European allies disappointed, as they had hoped for tangible steps, such as a ceasefire agreement. Al Jazeera's Kimberly Halkett, reporting from Anchorage, described the summit as much ado about nothing, arguing that it failed to produce meaningful results. The only achievements that were actually made was that the Russian president has been able to continue his war, which we know is now a war of attrition and which each day favors the Russian side, she said. Halkett suggested that Putin had gained valuable time to continue Russia's military campaign. Similarly, Al Jazeera's diplomatic editor James Bays noted that Ukraine's European allies, who had pushed for specific outcomes like a ceasefire, would likely view the summit as a big win for President Putin. He questioned the future direction of diplomatic efforts on Ukraine, given the lack of clarity from the Alaska talks. Melinda Herring, a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center, offered a more tempered perspective. She noted that expectations for the summit were low, and many in Kyiv and European capitals were relieved that no major decisions, such as a land swap, were made without Ukraine's involvement. That was the worst-case scenario, that major foreign policy decisions over Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity would be made without Ukraine, she told Al Jazeera. The summit concluded with a light-hearted exchange that hinted at future meetings. Trump thanked Putin and suggested they would speak again soon. Putin responded next time in Moscow, to which Trump replied that he might get a little heat on that one, but didn't rule it out. The exchange underscored the personal rapport between the two leaders, but it also raised questions about the trajectory of US-Russia relations and their impact on Ukraine. As the war in Ukraine continues, the Alaska summit has highlighted the complexities of negotiating peace in a conflict with deep geopolitical implications. While Trump and Putin expressed optimism, the lack of concrete agreements and the exclusion of Ukraine and its European allies from the talks have left many skeptical about the prospects for a swift resolution. For now, the focus shifts to Zelensky's upcoming meeting with Trump and the role of European leaders in shaping the next steps toward peace.